All right, we're going to get going. So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Ian Grant. I'm the director of the Entrepreneurship Center, known here as the E-Center. So thanks very much for coming. How many of you are new here? Fantastic. How many of those are not seniors? Great. So hopefully now you've seen it. Next year you'll come back more. And we can talk about some of that at the end of opportunities for you to engage what's going on here. So thanks a lot. A couple of housekeeping things first. For those of you that are in different classes and professors have given you the incentive to come here as well, make sure you just check your name off or write your name down, but check your name off probably in the back. I2 passport, I know everyone at this point would know to swipe in, so that's great. And also if you haven't gotten a raffle ticket, anyone here have not gotten a raffle ticket yet? All right, some really neat swag thanks to New Airport Brewing and Q Acoustics, who's one of our sponsors. $100 set of Bluetooth earphones and some other stuff, so we'll do that at the end. So do that. I want to thank WP Carey is the sponsor of this series for us, so very generous of them to be able to provide some funding for that. Just some reminders on I2 Passport. Thursday is the last physical event, which is the UNH Innovations Catalyst series for that, speaker series. The survey will come out shortly after that. There's actually, for those of you that fill that out, there'll be 3 drawings for $250 each at the final event, which is on May 7th. So again, most of you who are I2 Passport are here because you're in the hunt or ahead, way ahead, in some cases maybe. So at the end, there may be some opportunity based upon one of our guests for some beer. I need to legally say that for those of you who may grab one of those, you need to be 21. So please respect that. Appreciate it. And then finally, just this is the last in our series. So we did an amazing partnership with CAPS this semester, and the real focus was trying to help students understand that entrepreneurs don't necessarily come from any one focus, right? Any one major. And so, you know, the first 2 speakers we had, one was an illustrator, one was a healthcare analyst. Then we had a wildlife management person and a liberal arts student. And now we have 3 amazing guests tonight that I'll let Tyler introduce. And with that, Tyler Wentworth is at CAPS. He's the moderator for tonight, and we'll go from there. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm going to be very brief because I am not the show tonight. This is your wonderful talent here tonight, but I am Tyler Wentworth. I am the Director of Marketing, Communication, and Engagement for Career and Professional Success. It's a very long title, but Career and Professional Success. How many people have been to a CAPS event before? So that number is going to go up with the work that I'm doing, hopefully. We are your career services team here at UNH. We're here to help all of you find your next step, whether it's starting your own business or working in a more traditional field or going on to graduate school. We're all about helping you find your professional success. So this program with the E-Center is a natural fit for us to help you build the skills you'll need to survive and thrive in the future. So that's it about me. I have our wonderful panelists here. How this will work tonight: each of our panelists will give a quick overview of their company and some advice for you, and then we'll get right into Q&A. I have some prepared questions, but mine are not going to be as good as yours, so start thinking about them throughout the presentations. You guys, you're here tonight to ask questions of these gentlemen and pick their brains about the future and your future. So, our panelists tonight: Chris Webb. Chris is the co-founder at Newburyport Brewing Company. Chris was a psychology major and counseling and has a counseling MED from UNH. I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'll let them go through that, but that's Chris's background. Todd Baker, over there on the end. Todd Baker is the founder and president at Baker Properties, and Todd was a business and political science major here at UNH. And then last but certainly not least, John T. Bowen. John is the co-founder and managing partner at Media Bridge Capital Advisors, LLC. I'll throw the LLC in there. And it was a mechanical engineering major at UNH. So with this series of game changers, we're showing that innovation and entrepreneurship can come from any background. No matter your academic background, you have an idea, you pursue it with passion. You're going to take some risks to get there, but as long as you put in the work, you can work hard and pursue that passion. So without without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Chris to get us started and let you guys go from there.
Thank you, Tyler. Thanks, everyone. So I grew up in Durham, went to Oyster River. In fact, and my dad and mom are here. My dad taught at UNH for 42 years. I ended up going to UNH as well for both a bachelor's and then a master's. And my brother is here who also went to UNH. And my stepmom who also went to UNH. And my lovely wife who did not, but my baby is here too. And my nephew Riley. So I got my family section over here. So if I'm feeling stressed out, I need extra love, I'll come over here because I know I have a captive audience. And I founded two things in my life. I founded this brewery, which I'm going to talk about, and I actually founded a fraternity on campus at UNH. I never thought, growing up in Durham, I never thought I wanted to be in a fraternity because it just didn't seem like what I wanted to do. And I ended up, when you grow up in Durham, you're driving around the campus, right? And then all of a sudden you're in the campus. And my whole goal was like, fine, if I'm going to go to UNH, I'm not going to have a car, I'm going to live on campus, and I'm not going to room with anyone I went to high school with. I'm going to kind of throw myself in, which ended up being a great experience. And we didn't think, any of my friends didn't think we were going to do a fraternity, but anyway, to make a long story medium-sized, my buddy's brother started a Sigma Nu at Yale, so we ended up starting Phi Kappa Sigma, which is no longer here. So I started a fraternity, which was great and a lot of fun. But that's not why I'm here. I'm here to talk about the brewery. Anyone ever had Newburyport Brewing Company beer? All right, handful. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about, should I start my own business? And the question, I guess, is to you. Should you start your own business? Raise your hand if you think you want to start your own business. Okay, maybe a third of the room. The first thing I would say is freedom, right? Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad. I'm all grown up. Don't tell me what to do. So I'm the youngest child, right? And of 4 boys. So, I don't like being told what to do. And I think, businesses tend to be very patriarchal. It's like the CEO and the VP and the director and the manager. So as you get into the world of work, and I worked for 20 years before I started my own business, it is very much you are working for somebody. You have a manager who you may not like or respect, who may not be as smart or as talented as you, but it may even be keeping you down or controlling you. So at some point when I turned 40 and had my midlife crisis, I said, I'm tired of being someone else's fill in the blank. Bleep. Right? So freedom and flexibility, the fact that we live in a patriarchal society, we grow up in that, it's sort of like, I want flexibility, and yet you still have to be accountable. And I'll talk a little bit more about that too in terms of the kind of business you run. Hurry up and wait. A little experience goes a long way, right? Like I said, I think if I jumped into any new thing at 23, 24, 25, you're just not going to bring as much to the party. But if you get a job and you work for a company and you crush it and learn things, go small or go home. I worked for a company, when I started in 1994 in Boston for a small consulting company, I was the 30th employee and we were 2 million. 30th employee, 2 million. 5 years later, we were 30,200,000 people. So 30 people to 200, 2 million to 30 million in 5 years. And I was 24. I was just like, I'll do whatever it takes. I was in sales, and then I ended up running their on-site training business. And by the time I was 28, I had 10 people working for me, and I was making well into the 6 figures. And I never thought I would necessarily do that, but it's because it was a small company. Larger companies have better systems, right? You're going to have better, you're probably better training, but you're not going to have as much opportunity because there'll be more politics, and you won't necessarily get that chance. So if you're thinking about starting a business, my advice to you is to go work for a small business. What? Why should you do it? When should you do it? Hurry up, wait. What? Can you combine the big 3? No, not Larry, Kevin, and Robert. Raise your hand if you know what I mean by Larry, Kevin, and Robert. What do I mean, Ian? Celtics. Larry Bird, Kevin McHale, Robert Parrish, the original big 3. Not Paul, KG, and Ray. Raise your hand if you know what I'm talking about with Paul, KG, and Ray. A few more. Paul Pierce. No, not that big 3. And then lifestyle company versus a growth company. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. These are the big 3. Passion. Love. What do you love to do? What are you good at? How do you get PAID? That's what we're talking about here. You have to find the overlap between what you love, what you're good at, and how to get paid. I stole this from Jim Collins. Good to Great, Built to Last are 2 great books I would recommend. And the big 4, because the 4th one they talk about is how do you make a difference in the world? That's the other one that's big for the environment, B corporations. So I literally was trying to buy my old consulting firm. It didn't work out. I helped the 2 founders sell it. So that was kind of fun. I went through the experience of selling a company. And I said, all right. So I literally like listed out, what do I love? And I was like, beer. And I'm a musician, so I wrote music. And I'm a guitar player, but I'm not very good. And there's no market for passionate, average guitar players. Unless you want to be like Martin Sexton and sit on the T station at Davis Square and play for dollars. But it's hard to have a family and a mortgage making $30 a day when you're 40-something years old. So I wrote beer, I really did. And I lived in Colorado in the early 90s, and I got introduced to craft beer. My buddy's been at Smutty Nose since 1993. So I had a friend who worked for Big Beer, Smutty Nose. I thought I was good at sort of the, sales and marketing stuff. And I thought, was there an opportunity to start a coastal brand? So how many of you guys ever been to Newburyport, Mass? It's a lot of you. It's a lot like Portsmouth, New Hampshire. In fact, some people call it Portsmouth, Massachusetts, which offends me greatly, and offends anyone from Portsmouth greatly. So growing up in Durham, it's really hard that I've lived in Mass since 1994. So some people consider me a masshole, but I'm actually from New Hampshire. But there are 4 major seaport towns from Maine to Mass. There's Portland, Portsmouth, Newburyport, and Boston. They're all very similar. In 2011, when I was thinking about starting this, there were breweries in Portland, Portsmouth, nothing in Newburyport. So I thought, geez, can I capture the essence of that beautiful seaport town in Newburyport to be a brand? Turns out I can. If you start a lifestyle business, it's me and Bobby McGee. It's you and your buddy. You're starting a bakery. You're starting a little marketing firm, consulting company. You're kind of just making enough money to live the dream, enough to have your cake and eat it too. And you're not really accountable to anybody else except maybe your partner or yourself. And that's a great business to start. It's very different than a growth business, right? This is like, Econ 101. You probably already know that. But raising capital, having investors, working your butt off, being accountable to those investors, high risk, high reward, right? And that's what we tried to do. So I went over to see so I have an 8-piece funk band. That's my kind of music thing. And I went over to see my trumpet player, who's a good friend of mine and my neighbor. And we were watching the Bruins win the Stanley Cup in 2011. And I walked into Bill's house and I announced, I'm going to start the Newburyport Brewing Company, because I'd done my little passion, skills, and market. And Bill looks at me, he goes, I'm in. I go, I didn't invite you. I didn't say, do you want to start? I said, but in reality, now, I just didn't want to be the 40-year-old guy driving into Boston working in the consulting firm. I didn't mind being the 40-year-old guy. I didn't want to be the 50-year-old guy. I wanted to have my own freedom, and Bill did too. The joke that I say about that, of course, we were like super excited. We were like, starting a brewery. This is the coolest thing ever. The reality is I make beer, not money. It's a highly expensive thing to make. It's manufacturing. It's highly competitive. So I was joking with Bill the other day. I said, when I walked into your house in 2011, if I had said to you, hey, Bill, you want to start a manufacturing plant of a perishable product in a highly competitive market that makes no margin? Not good. I should have gone back to the music thing, but we'll talk about that. All right, so Newburyport Brewing Company, we're Delaware C Corp, premium New England brand. Newburyport Adventure Music. Yeah, we sort of have 3 brand promises: make really great beer, and you guys can try and tell me if you think it's great. We've won a bunch of awards, so I'm pretty proud of it. Everything is in cans. Everything's kind of, as you can see, bright and meant to be coastal, right? We're Newburyporters. You got it in the can. Bring it when you're going to the beach, playing golf. And then music. We did a guitar pick, and we put the guitar pick underneath every 6-pack for the first 6 months. And so people would just, get their beer, and there'd be a little pick right there. We didn't tell anyone we were doing it. And so we got all these cool images on Instagram and Facebook of people that, playing their guitar. Oh my God, this is so cool. So our whole thing is, how do we integrate music into beer, right? It's kind of a strange thing. You don't mind, do you? All right, just trying to make you jealous. Demonstrating. I will not shotgun that. This is not a Natty Light. Don't forget, I went to UNH. So we have a tasting room that has live music 5 days a week. I've actually gotten some musicians, like you guys know Rusted Root, the band from the 90s. We got the lead singer to come. We did a recording with Willie Porter, who's a phenomenal guitar player. So you can go on our website and find that, musicians. We're trying to just do our best to integrate music, because one of the things that I think is the way I like to think about our business, is not manufacturing a perishable, low-margin product in a highly competitive environment, but we're in the business of making people happy. Beer makes people happy. Music makes people happy. Guitar picks randomly make people happy. Swag makes people happy. We have these cool can-shaped pint glasses that actually tilt and support. We partnered with Diane's Fine Desserts, which was owned by Heinz, and we brewed a Greenhead IPA almond cake, which was phenomenal. So now we can think about the business differently. I was just talking to my business partner this morning. I said, we are actually an all-natural beverage company. We're not just a beer company. Let's do some, let's do some craft cocktails. Let's do a whiskey lemonade. Let's do a sparkling lemonade. Let's do a cider. Like, how can we? Because I've got all of New England. I sell my beer in all of New England. We have big distributors. I have Salesforce. So now I can just sort of plug and play any other kinds of fun beverages or any other kinds of products because I've got distribution and I've got Salesforce. Yeah, we were the first to can our entire line. We were the 7th fastest growing brewery out of the gate in year 1. I think that's all I want to say about that. Oh, that was a long time ago, 30 pounds ago, 20,000 beers ago. Partners and roles. So, the first thing we did was we raised $1 million. Does that sound like a lot? You only need, to raise $1 million, you only need 33 people to give you $33,333.33. And the good news is, rich people hang out together. So if you know some people that have money, they tend to know people who have money. And when you pick a brewery to start something fun like that, it's a bit of a hero investment for people, right? High net worth people going, sure, I'll throw 25G at that. I'll throw 50G at that. My dad actually invested. Smartest investment you ever make that? Yes, it was. He's like, I'm still waiting for my return. So, we raised $1 million. I'm sort of Mr. Outside. I'm doing the sales and marketing. I spent 20 years in management consulting. Bill is doing Mr. Inside. He forced himself to be a COO. I think when you pick a partner, you want to look for 2 things. Well, 3 maybe. Do I have a great relationship with them? Number 1. 2, are they as passionate about it as me? Do they want to do it as much? Bill wanted to do it without me even asking him. And by the way, he kept pushing me, when are we doing this? When are we doing this? I probably wouldn't have done it without him. And then complementary skill sets. Can you, if I'm good at sales, in marketing, he should be good at operations and finance, in theory, right? If you think about sort of the 4 of the major things. He's not good at operations and finance, unfortunately, but he's forced himself to be, and he's done a decent job. But we know where we're weak. But my advice to you as you're getting started is pick a partner that is passionate as you and hopefully has complementary skill sets. All right. Yeah, I guess the other thing I would say, we raised $1 million. I maxed out my credit cards. I had tens of thousands of dollars. I mortgaged my house. So get prepared to kick some ass if you're going to do a growth business. And when you have investors, they're expecting a return. They want a liquidity event. If you have a lifestyle business, maybe you're borrowing some money from a friends or family. Maybe you're maxing out your credit cards, you're signing your house over, but it's a different mentality because you don't necessarily need $1 million to start a business. We started a brick and mortar. I have a 10,000 square foot brewery a half mile from downtown Newburyport with a canning line. Can someone keep that baby quiet in the front? So just so you know, you got to take a risk and you got to be ready to kind of put yourself out there. But at the end of the day, if you believe in yourself, you'll make it happen. It's like my friend Victor, who's an actor, works for my old company, and I saw him act, and I said, you are phenomenal. I said, why aren't you on Broadway? Why aren't you making it happen? And he said, Chris, I think because I never was 100% committed. I said, what do you mean? He goes, I never really was all in. And it's like the people, Jason Tatum, there was an article in Boston Globe about Jason Tatum, who's a Celtics player, and by the age of 3, he knew he wanted to be a professional basketball player. It's almost like there is no second choice. I'm going to be a musician. I'm going to be a professional athlete. I'm going to be an entrepreneur. I'm going to start. If you have that mentality where it's like nothing will stop you, you will do it, right? But you kind of have to have that level of focus. All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the beers that we have, and then I'm going to shut up and sit down because we've got many other panelists that are awesome. So just really quick, we have a West Coast style IPA. It's about 50% of our business. It's awesome. Beer Advocate, got an outstanding rating. Part of what I'm showing you for this is so you can kind of see supporting, as you're getting ready to pitch to investors, we had a similar thing. You want to sort of make it, introduce the product, and then have a second slide or a second point. Our Plum Island Belgian White, which I'm drinking right now, won the bronze in the World Beer Cup. The World Beer Cup is like the Beer Olympics. It's every other year. If you win an award, it's a big deal. So there was a brewery, Hogarden took the gold, a brewery in England took the silver, and we took the bronze. So in theory, we have the third best Belgian white in the world and the best in America. You can decide if you think that's true or not. Our pale ale is a very nice, refreshing, balanced pale ale. It got on Delta Airlines. This is now, and when you fly Delta, this is what you get. You knew that, right, guys?
First class.
So what's funny about this, it's a pretty cool infographic. They put this up in Times Square. I got a call from the general manager for customer experience for Delta Airlines in 2014, a year after we started. And he said, I've had your pale ale, it's delicious. How would you like to be considered to be on Delta? And I was like, are you fucking kidding me? I would love to be considered to be on Delta. And then I didn't hear from him for like 6 months. So like the good entrepreneur, every month I'm like pinging him, hey, did you see what Southwest Airlines is doing and how's it going? He finally gets back to me and says, ship beer to Atlanta where Delta's headquarters is. So I shipped a 6-pack of all of our beers. Don't hear from him. He calls me back finally, says, congratulations, you made it to be the Northeast Regional Shuttle. So Delta they have the Northeast region, the Southeast, the Midwest, the West Coast, and they picked a couple local breweries to be the beer of choice on those flights. So from LaGuardia, Boston, LaGuardia, Chicago, LaGuardia, DC, you could get Blue Point and Newburyport. So what's interesting about this, 2 things I would point out. One, when this infographic came, Newburyport was second. You got Sweetwater, Stone, Ballast Point, Brooklyn Brewery, Lagunitas, Blue Point, and Sam Adams. All, at that point, like Blue Point got bought by Anheuser-Busch, Lagunitas got bought by Heineken, Brooklyn took an investment from a foreign company, Ballast Point got bought for $1 billion by Constellation, and Sweetwater, I think, has some private equity. Here's Little Newburyport Brewing Company at that point. There's like 6 employees. We're basically nobody. But we're sitting with the big boys. So this came and all the owners were blind copied. How do you like this infographic? Are you happy with it? Very happy with it. We got the second spot. The next day it came back and we were switched with Brooklyn. So I'm like, somebody from Brooklyn Brewery was like giving, hey, we got Yankee tickets. Someone from Sam Adams was doing Red Sox tickets and Little Newburyport wasn't doing anything. But that was a big win for a small brewery. And if you've taken a marketing class, you probably know the pufferfish mentality, right? Try to seem bigger and better than you are. And part of that is partnering with big established companies. So that was really big for us. Our session IPA, Melt Away, delicious. Won some awards. Our Maritime Lager, the craft lager, is phenomenal. If you like what beer is supposed to taste like. Easy drinking Munich Helles. Yeah, we're in the gross. I just put these on because they look so cool. Like I know what I'm talking about. We're the 10th largest brewery in Massachusetts. How big do you think the beer market is in the country in terms of billions of dollars? Any ideas? Throw it out there. No one will judge you.
100 billion?
100?
100 billion?
100 billion. That's why he's on this panel. It's 100 billion. And so craft breweries like Newburyport and Stoneface, and by the way, the Stoneface guys went to UNH, and when they were getting ready to start, they called me and said, hey, I went to UNH, they're younger, would you be willing to tell me what you did? And I said, sure. So Errol and Pete came to Newburyport and sat down with me and Bill, and I told them exactly how to build a brewery, and they went and did it better than me, and I'm pissed about it. But UNH, the beer industry is great. The Pete guys went to UNH, and they were at Camp Belknap, where I went for a while. So the beer industry is very cottage and colloquial and friendly. But they say craft is going to be 20% by 2020, the year 2020, and then the 80% is still drinking Bud Light, Coors Light, Miller Lite, Corona. So one of the reasons why we did this lager is because there's a huge opportunity to drink, because if you're mowing your lawn or you're going to a Patriots tailgate, you're probably not going to drink 20 Greenhead IPAs or even 10, but you might drink lager. So our whole position in the marketplace is to say, let's be crafty, let's be premium, but let's be approachable, right? Our IPAs, we have the hardcore ones and we have the session ones. Our lager is 4.9%. We don't use rice or corn. It's not watered down. It's delicious. Our Belgian white is like a premium Blue Moon. If you like Blue Moon, you'll love Plum Island. So that's our thing, is to not try to be this crazy esoteric brand making, I was hanging out in Salisbury Beach the other day because I live in Amesbury, and the woman that was trying to sell condos, and she was like, I hate your micro brews. I was like, why do you hate our micro brews? She's like, they're so bitter and they're so high alcohol. So her idea of a craft brewery or microbrewery is bitter and high alcohol. But I've got a lager at 4.9% and a Belgian white at 5.4% that is exactly like Bud Heavies and Blue Moon, only better. That's our tasting room. Join me for a beer. Thanks a lot.
Well, Chris had some good advice there. Thanks, Chris. His business is much more fun than mine. So my name's Todd Baker. I graduated from UNH in 1991, and I was a business and political science major. I graduated into a bad economy, and so here you probably have a lot of employers coming this time of year. When I graduated in 1991, it was a recession in New England, and hardly anybody was coming on campus. I think I had maybe 2 or 3 interviews. One was to sell suitcases for Samsonite, and another one was kind of like an insurance sales rep. So I and 2 of my buddies bought a van, and we drove it across country, and we ended up in Alaska, and we cut fish for the summer. And we saved up some money, and I took that money and took my girlfriend, who's now my wife, but we met at UNH, and we bought plane tickets to Japan. So we moved to Japan, lived there for 2 years, started teaching English, and then I met a guy on a train who was a commercial real estate developer, and they had a big project, a couple million square feet in Osaka Bay, and he hired me to be a leasing agent. So I was the only English speaker in this pretty big company. It was like, let's say, a couple $1 billion. They were building this 1 million square foot trade center in Osaka Bay. So I did that for like a year. I learned to speak Japanese a bit. My wife wanted to come back. She left me there for about 6 months, and I followed her back to Chicago. And so I found myself in Chicago. This was 1993, and I got a job with a Japanese company because I could speak some Japanese. And so I was doing importing and exporting. So I was selling mostly products from the United States to Japan, but also sending some products from Japan back to the US. And that was an extremely hard business. Customers, the margins were thin. Customers would ask you at 4 o'clock to come pick up a product from them. Sometimes it was like a car. You'd have to run over, get the car, pack it up, put it on an airplane, send it, and maybe make a 10-point margin gross. So it's tough business. I realized I wanted to get out of that, and I wanted to go back to business school. And so I applied and was accepted to study Japanese and business at Cornell. So I ended up getting an MBA at Cornell, and I studied Japanese a couple of years while I was there. And that was a great experience. Met a lot of interesting people. Made a lot of friends there. But one thing that you guys will find when you get out of UNH, the people that are in this room have as much talent, and you're as bright as anybody out there. And it doesn't matter if they're from an Ivy League school, or if they're from another country. You should have a lot of confidence that the education that you're getting here, because it's just as good as any place else. So I'm going to just walk through briefly about my company. So I ended up, after business school, I took a job as a banker. So I worked for Chase Manhattan Bank, and that was a good experience because I was working in their workout department. And the workout department is where loans go when they're not current. So you have problem loans, and I learned some of the things that cause problem loans. And then I was hired away to go to work for GE Capital, and I worked in their aviation finance group. And the aviation finance group owns about half of the commercial airplanes in the country. So a lot of American Airlines, Southwest Airlines, a lot of those airplanes are actually owned by GE, and they lease them back. So I was doing a lot of leasing. So I learned a lot of financial analysis. I learned a lot of credit analysis. I learned a lot about leasing while I was at GE. And then I got hired away from there. GE was a great place to be when you're in your 30s or 40s, and I happened to be like 26 at the time. So I wanted to be where all the action was, and all the action at that time was in Manhattan. So I ended up going to work for an investment bank, and we were building power plants. So I was raising money to build electric gas-fired electricity plants around the country. And so another great experience, worked with some really smart people, learned Excel really well. So I'm like really good at spreadsheets by this point. And but I didn't like that job. So I was making lots of money. I was living in the Upper West Side. My wife had a great job. We were traveling around a lot. But the people that I was working with that were in their 40s, they were working crazy hours. So they were in at 7 a.m. They were working till 10 p.m. I would show up, before they did. So I was there at like 6:30 and I would work till midnight. So it was just like a ridiculous amount of work. The people weren't that kind to each other. It's like really cutthroat. So I just didn't really feel that comfortable there. It's not like New Hampshire. It was, people would sort of step on your neck any chance they get. So I wanted to be my own boss. And so I found a company in Columbus, Ohio, and this was in 1998, and I bought a pet supply distributorship. So I moved my wife out to Columbus, Ohio. A business school buddy and I partnered up, and probably similar to what Chris did. We were friends. We were both kind of passionate about starting a business. We had somewhat complementary skill set. But we turned out to be not the greatest partners, primarily because when we had a problem, neither of us really had deep pockets. So we bought this company. It was doing like $7 million in sales. We did an SBA loan. We basically leveraged it highly. So we ended up putting like 2% equity in, and we borrowed the rest from the SBA. And that seemed like a good idea if you believe your projections, where everything keeps getting better. But the pet supply business at that time was changing dramatically. So it was PetSmart, Petco, and grocery stores and mass market were all going big into pets, and our customers were the mom and pop pet store. So our customers were sucking wind, and we ended up as a distributor of pet supplies just fighting with other competitors in our area, and our margins continued to get squeezed. So when I got there, we were doing $7 million in sales, and we had like a 35% gross margin. And by the time I sold the company 4 years later, we were doing like $13 million in sales, so we grew the company fairly dramatically, but we were down to like a 24% margin. So the actual profits on it were much lower. Fortunately, we were able to sell the company, so we sold it to a private equity group. And that group out of Chicago ended up going out of business like 2 years later, because it was a very hard business. We knew it was a hard business. But one of my investors gave me some really good advice at that time. We were, as I said, we had grown the company from 7 to 13, and we were like, well, maybe we just got to get bigger. There's all these fixed costs, and eventually we're going to start making a profit. And he said, why don't you go find a company that's bigger than you in your industry and see what their margins are. And so we did. We got a company in contract. We saw the real numbers. And turns out that we were doing like a 2% margin on 13 million. They were doing a 1% margin on 35 million. So his advice to me was, and it was great advice, this was one of my first mentors, he said, you happen to be in a bad industry. Nobody's making any money in this industry. I commend you for working really hard and doing a pretty good job, but you're in a bad industry. My advice to you is to get out. And it just like struck a chord, and like the next day I resigned as the president of the company. We put the company on the market. We ended up selling it. And I went to work with this investor as a junior partner in his commercial real estate company. So this is 2001 now, and so I'm running accounting and finance for this company that had like 3,000 apartments in Columbus, Ohio. and I learned that business really well. So over the course of the next 5 years, I ran 9 different profit and loss statements. I did all the refinancing, so I really learned the numbers really well. I got to use my Excel spreadsheet expertise, and by the 5th year, I had an opportunity to buy one of this guy's properties. We had done a couple of deals together, and I had a junior ownership stake in a couple of deals, but I had an opportunity to buy one of his properties, and it was a fairly big property. So it was like a $15 million purchase, and I knew it was a great property. It was in a great location. It was where condo conversions were all the rage in 2005. We could buy these apartments for $53,000 a unit, and we thought we could sell them for somewhere between 100 and 150. So I leveraged up again. So here's my second leverage opportunity. This time I knew way more about the business, so it worked out really well. And we ended up selling half of the units. So we had bought 216 apartments. We sold 104 of them in the first year, and then we kept the rest of them for long-term investment. And I held those for like 11 years, and they kind of supported my family and myself for like 11 years. They made a lot of money for a long time, so it was great. I just sold them in November. So that was the good part of Columbus, Ohio. The bad part of Columbus was that while we were there, my wife's parents both passed away, and they were from Columbus. That's how we got introduced to the seller originally. And so she was really sad everywhere that we went. And so we decided to move from Columbus back here. So we bought an old house in Newcastle, which is right next to Portsmouth, not far from here. And we fixed it up, and I was running my apartments from afar. And then I started to do the same thing I was doing there. I started to do it here. So I was buying properties and fixing them up and trying to hold them for the long term for the most part. So that's what I've been doing for the last, I guess, like 18 years now. So my company, established in 2001. We have an office that we bought the building in Portsmouth. I've got 8 people that work with me now, and my buddy that I bought the pet supply company with is back with me again, so he and I are partners again. We own and operate real estate investments, so we have a management company, we have a landscaping company, and we do leasing, we do some other stuff, but it's mostly like shopping centers. We have some apartments, we have a few office buildings and things like that. And it's all private investment. So as Chris told you, if you go into a room and tell them you want to, buy a brewery, everybody raises their hand. Well, if you can provide cash flow, stable investments that have been tried and proven good, like commercial real estate, people will invest in that too. And I had a pretty good track record. I've been doing it for a long time. So I've been working with the same group of maybe 18 investors, and we've bought maybe 20 properties over the past decade or so. So what we try to do is we call ourselves sustainable local problem solvers in real estate. We're apartments, residential, we do some commercial. We seek a win-win for the community. So when we go into an area, we find some place that's neglected, we try to think what would make the neighborhood better and what would make the businesses operate better there. We do care about our customers and community because this is where we live. We try to be involved. We've done 20 projects. All of them have been successful. Some of them, super home runs, and nothing worse than a single. And here's an example of a couple of projects. So I bought Hampton Airfield in 2013 with a few investors. And when I bought it, this was a grass runway here. And we ended up investing in another $1 million and paving it so that it made the airport just a better place to operate. It's safer. And in turn, we had all of the buildings, the rent went up. So we invest in the property, we make it better, the demand goes up for the asset that we're trying to lease. In this case, it was hangars. And It's worked out well. One thing I didn't expect when I bought this, I'm a real estate guy. I ended up taking over the flight school as well. So now I own the flight school. So I've got a bunch of pilots that work for me, and we have a few planes there. I'm a pilot too, so I have a private plane that I learned. That was one of the things I learned when I was in Columbus, Ohio. Here's a project that some of you may have seen. This is in Exeter. This is Exeter Crossing Shopping Center. This was a rundown former car dealership, and there was a couple of houses behind there. We bought it. We had actually a very environmentally friendly project where we pulled the entire project out of the wetland, built a retaining wall, put in permeable asphalt, and put in a couple new tenants. So Convenient MD is in there now, and there's a Little Sprouts daycare and a couple other things. So worked out really well, and the neighbors are really happy as well. This is Bola Rama Plaza in Portsmouth, which we bought about 3 years ago. And again, a lot of times we find people that the business is kind of old and tired, and the sellers are kind of old and tired. Their energy levels. This guy that sold it to us is a great guy, but he wanted to retire, and so he sold us the property. We tore down a portion of it and put up. That's right, and. We tore down a portion of it, put up Convenient MD Tower, and renovated the face of it, and we just refinanced it, and it worked out pretty well. And that's kind of the end of my portion of the presentation. So happy to tell you my thoughts if you have questions about. During the course of this, I have a lot of banking relationships because we've borrowed millions of dollars to do a lot of these projects, and I was invited to be on director of a bank board. So I'm on this a bank called Sanford Institution for Savings, and I've been a director there for 2 years. So if you're interested in banking, if you'd like to talk about distribution, if you'd like to talk about living overseas or real estate investments, happy to tell you whatever I can tell you. John.
I have one slide you'll like. Thank you so much. Clearly I need to switch my career. They're having more fun. So I'm going to go through these pretty quick. MediaBridge Capital Advisors, we are an investment banking firm, and we focus on media technology. So this screen, that camera, if there's speakers in the ceilings or anything, if you watch movies or listen to music, we serve the entrepreneurs that make the technology that make all that happen. It was founded by myself and Ethan Jacks. Ethan was the chief legal officer at Avid Technology, who you may know, but they basically took splicing film and put it on a computer. And then my background is in equity research. We surround ourselves with about 12 to 14 industry advisors, and they're all domain experts, whether it's audio or video or private equity. They all come with the punch. And so I don't know, I know when I was an undergraduate, I had no idea what investment banking is. Does anybody know what investment banking is? But ultimately, we help entrepreneurs sell their companies, and we work mostly with founder owners, and that's kind of our niche. So we help them either raise capital, mostly from private equity, or we help them sell themselves. We can also work with larger companies to find willing sellers, but most of our work is on the sell side. What we are not is investors, right? So we don't have a group of capital that we're looking to invest in folks. We're more, think of us as real estate brokers for businesses. It's the best way to describe it. And again, it's technologies that support the entertainment and then the corporate government and education space. So some of our clients, South State Logic was sold to Audiotonics. Audiotonics is a British company. They were both actually British companies. But if you go to a rock concert or you go to a recording studio, you're going to find Solid State Logic or one of the companies that Audiotonics now owns. Ultimat, we've all watched movies, and you watch Tom Hanks hanging on to the frame of an airplane as it takes off, and it looks like he's taking off, but he's really not. It's that animation behind him is blue screen or green screen. And Ultimat was the original inventor of that, and they held all the original patents for it. Boris FX bought a company called GenArts, and basically what both of those companies do are special effects. So when you're watching a movie, you see explosions, you see fire, all that dramatic stuff is done by those companies. And then the last one is Final Draft. 90% of all scripts that are written for Hollywood are written in the Final Draft format. Anyway, I can talk more about this later if you'd like. Really wanted to spend most of the time with some other thoughts. So how did I get to here? I almost don't even consider myself an entrepreneur. I just sort of got here. It's really an extension of what I've been doing for the last several years. So if I go through my career path, I was a mechanical engineer here at UNH. And what did I discover? I just discovered I didn't want to be an engineer. Okay, and I discovered that at year 2.5. But I toughed it out and I finished it because I really just wanted to get out and start earning money. But that mechanical engineering degree gave me some credibility for my first job in IT sales for Digital Equipment Corporation. And then I subsequently went on to work for 3 other public companies. And that's sort of an important point. After 12 years in sales, I just decided I wanted something more and something different, and I really wanted to own a profit and loss. So I either wanted to be a general manager, I wanted to be a CEO, but I knew I needed this, different skills in order to make that leap. So I went back to graduate school, but in the process of doing that, I joined an investment club because I had worked for 4 public companies beforehand, and seeing what was happening on the inside didn't always match what was happening in Wall Street, and so it always made me curious. So I joined an investment club, and that club turned into $1 million fund, and then that fund turned into a summer internship at Templeton, and then that all turned into a job as a Wall Street analyst covering tech. And then the market crash of the early 2000s happened, and half my firm got laid off immediately, and the other half got laid off 6 months later. And that's when I made the switch over to investment banking. And after doing that at a small firm for a few years, I left for a larger firm, ultimately where I pulled in Ethan as my partner, and Ethan was actually my first sale of any company I'd ever done, so we've known each other for quite a long time. And then being part of a larger organization, we were really part of a great firm. They focused mostly on medical technology, and we were the media guys at the end of the hall, and so we thought it was just better from a branding perspective to go out on our own and create focus, and that so far has worked out pretty well. I wanted to talk about my clients because my clients are all entrepreneurs. And I want to put them in 2 buckets, right? So there are industry guys who have been working for 10 years, 20 years, that know the industry, but they found, and this is going to be a consistent theme throughout your lives. Technologies change, right? And there's a way to make existing businesses better, and you can do it through incremental change, right? So better, faster, cheaper. And I'll go through an example in a second. But it's really using the latest technology to usurp or overcome current legacy solutions. The second bucket is our inventors that found a way to be disruptive. And so they just created a new way of doing things. Or they found other parts from other industries. So for example, automotive, right? There's huge volumes in automotive chips, right? And that drives the price down, right? So, okay, well, how can I use that chip in this video processor and drop the price by a factor of 10? And the last point, there's a joke that we always say, how did God create heaven and earth in 6 days? And the answer is that he didn't have an installed base, right? And if you look at the large companies, right, they have to take care of their customers. They just can't walk away and go service the new need. And that focus on your existing installed base is a real drain on the organization. And that's the advantage to the entrepreneur, because you're small and you're nimble and you can move very quickly, much faster than a larger organization, but you have to overcome their marketing muscle and the messages they put out. And that's real. So I had 3 examples. The first one is a gentleman by the name of Dave Barnes. He's an example of better, faster, cheaper, right? He was the first one to take an existing hardware solution and use FPGA technology and put software code on top of it. And there was a lot of advantages to that, one of which is it dropped his gross margins, or actually raised his gross margins by 20 points. And that made him very competitive. And so he was very, very profitable because he could price his products at just below his competitors and still make more money. But again, this is evolutionary versus disruptive. Nicola Vireem, who was the CEO and owner of Teradek, he's literally a rocket scientist. But he worked for GE Security, right? So he had access to other technologies outside of the media and entertainment industry, and said, "Oh," and he happened to be, he's a hobbyist in photo and video, and so it's like, well, how can I apply this to this, to the video industry? And so he basically took a $150,000 satellite truck, right? Watched his competitors do it for $50,000 to $100,000, and then he came out with a product that was $5,000 to $10,000. So it's an order of magnitude cheaper. And the effect of that was that, he decided, the big guys are going to just chase that top 10% of the market, the guys who are willing to spend, $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 for some technology, and I'm going to sell it for 10. And so he just took that whole lower part of the pyramid, and it was one of my favorite customers because he was doubling his numbers every single year, no matter how I could slice them. He was doing it at 20% gross margin, or no, EBITDA margin. And it was a great assignment because nobody ever argued with me on the financials, right? Because they were just growing, and if you don't hurry up and buy it, it's only going to get more expensive. Mark Ethier is a gentleman who could have gone to the Berklee School of Music, or he could have gone to MIT. He chose MIT. Just a brilliant guy. He's an outside-of-the-box thinker. So it's not about efficiency. It's, how do I do it differently? How do I do it better? And one of the things he did was, it's Photoshop for sound, right? So if you ever watch the series Lost, right, and it's on this deserted island with no airplanes, well, it was actually filmed on the main island with lots of airplanes going over top, and he would just point and click, delete. Now you have a deserted island. So again, evolutionary, disruptive, thinking outside the box. So it's all about the journey, and that's totally cliche, and I get it. I'm just going to read this last line because I think it's important. So your journey prepares you for your future opportunity. Just work hard and pay attention. And why do I say that? It's everybody know the term FANG stocks, so Facebook, Alphabet, Netflix, and Google, right? Those companies didn't even exist until 11 years after I graduated. And a lot of those companies didn't even hit their stride for 20 years after I graduated. Right? The iPhone just came 10 years ago, and the iPhone has 120 million times more processing power than the processors that sent people to the moon, right? And it required liquid cooling, but we carry them around in our pockets, and that's just where we are. So think ahead. It's like, where are we going to be in 10 or 20 or 30 years? Is it AI? What's going to be the new iPhone? And the other point is that. Again, two buckets. You're not personally there yet. Again, I didn't even know what an investment banker was when I was an undergraduate, so I couldn't have just decided to get there because I just wasn't exposed to it. And as you go out and you work and your friends go out and work, you're going to hear what they do and you're going to learn. And the other point is that the supporting technology doesn't exist yet, right? But you'll get exposed to it as you work. And it might be 5 years from now, it might be 10 years from now, or it might be in your dorm room if you're a really smart person like Mark Ethier, and just have a passion for music and can figure out a better way of doing it. So it's just hard to tell, but just work hard and pay attention. So I know when I was graduating, it's like, okay, well, what do I do now, right? I know what I want to be in 10 years, but what do I do now? And so I don't know. Follow what interests you the most. Find a problem that you're motivated to solve, and just do it. Who knows what it'll turn into? Join an established company and learn from that business. Because at that business, you're going to say, okay, well, this is what we do. Again, we have an install base. And if we didn't have an install base, how do we do it better, faster, cheaper? How can I apply updated technologies like HTML, FPGAs, the like? And what niche is going unserved? Is there a niche that I can carve out, really focus on, and make a business out of it? And then lastly, summer internships. This is an opportunity for you to, hey, I think I want to do investment banking. Why don't I go work for investment banking for summer, and then I can have your experience and understand that people aren't so nice, right? And then you'll get that, and you'll decide whether you can put up with that or
I
not.
didn't mean you, John.
No, I'm a nice investment banker. But again, if anybody wants to do that, you have to start this summer because that's when they make their decisions, by the way. But again, this is all to test what you think. And it builds a resume, by the way. So it's not a bad thing. So startup advice, 3 things. One is, recurring revenue streams. So if anybody uses the Adobe Creative Suite, you're paying them $30 a month, $50 a month for the honor to use that, and they're going to bill you forever, right? But in the old days, we would just sell you a $400 license, right? And then I'd have to figure out a way to sell it to you again or find somebody else to buy it. And ultimately, it made revenues very, very choppy or risky. And especially private equity folks, they like recurring revenue stream because it makes for a nice consistent stream of income, and it also de-risks the revenue stream and the business. The second point, and can anybody here see their life 10 years from now? I mean, I know when I was an undergraduate, what are you going to be doing when you're 30 or 32? It's like, oh God, I don't know. I'm going to be grown up. I'm going to have a house and kids, and I'm going to be CEO of a company. I had no idea. I couldn't see it. But with all of my customers, it's taken them at least 10 years to get there. We raised money for Mark Ethier, but that was 10 years after he started his company. And it was comical because the press article said, oh, startup raises $12 million. And it's like, I called Mark and said, Mark, I didn't realize you're a startup. Right? It's a 10-year startup. And so I know it's hard for you to think 10 years ahead forward from now, but very few companies are going to start and get sold within 2 years. So you have to be mentally prepared for that journey and not assume that it's going to go quick. And so there's a thing called a due diligence list. And I'm assuming nobody's heard of that before, but effectively it's a list of things that a buyer of your company will ask you for, right? So what are your revenues? How do you break them out? What are your gross margins per product? It's a deep and thorough process. And if you get your hands on one of those lists, right, you're going to understand what a buyer's going to ask you for in 10 years when they want to buy you, right? And the real benefit there is it's going to help you structure your company. It's going to help you structure your filing cabinets. You're going to make sure that you keep all the board meeting notes, right? And it's just all those things that you should be doing so that when the buyer buys you, he doesn't say, oh, I can't buy you now because you weren't organized. Anyway, I think it's a great list. Krish, you might have something to say on this. I wanted to make the point, sales is everything, right? Without sales, you don't have a company. So unless you're a virtual startup, like, I don't know, Facebook or something where it's just viral and you don't need salespeople, you're going to need sales. And I've just find so much in my career and then outside of my career, people say, they whine about sales. Oh, sales isn't doing what I want them to do, blah, blah, blah. And I think it's just important to, understand the beast, right? It's a competitive, motivated group of folks that like money, right? And so if they're not doing what you want them to do, it's because you're not goaling them right. Right? So set the right goals, know the beast. And then if you can find that top 2%, find them. They're worth their weight in gold. Pay them more money than you're making, okay? Because they will make more incrementally. I was always roughly in the top 10%, and I always had tremendous respect for the top 2%. One example, the largest deal in the company that I was working for, which was McDonnell Douglas, the biggest deal that was ever brought in there was pulled out of another salesperson's trash can by one of those top 2% guys, right? They're a special breed. If you can find them, grab them and pay them well. I'm not going to go deep into this, but sources of capital, my advice is don't take anybody else's money unless you have to, right? Because you lose control and you have a fiduciary responsibility to somebody else. Now, if you can't grow your company, like Mark Ethier, for example, right? He ran his company for 10 years. He was very profitable, but he wanted to take it in another direction, right? And he couldn't do it in the time frame that he wanted to do it because he needed to move fast, otherwise the competitive forces would beat him to it. So he had to take the money in order to grow his company very quickly in order to get there. Okay, but just understand there's a cost, right? And again, if your 10% equity is going to be worth far more than your 100% equity, take the money and grow the business quickly. But be clear about why you're taking somebody else's money, because you do lose control of the company. And even if you own 51% of the company, by the way, in the terms and conditions that a private equity firm will give you, they really have control. So lessons learned from education. You all have school advisors, right? And you're probably assigned one, right? It's not enough. And in my case, I decided I didn't want to be an engineer, right? And my advisor was an engineer, and he didn't really know what to do with me. And so, I think you should build a board of advisors, right? Your parents' friends, one of the professors. I should have gone to the business school. Ian. Yeah. Use Ian. Have multiple people with multiple backgrounds, and they can give you advice from different directions. Another one, find a professor that has a great reputation, right? And take the class, even if you have no interest in the subject, because the best are inspiring, and it's nice to be inspired by one of your professors. One of the examples, which was really meaningful for me, I was taking a retail class, and I had no interest in retail. But I was an undergraduate engineering student here. So anyway, we're in the class. The first class is about Walmart, and we take 5 more classes. We finally hit Target or something like that. And so we're reviewing some of the in the Target case study. We're looking at the the different ratios and metrics that are used, and then he says, "Okay, tell me about Target," and he gives a perfectly fine answer. And he looks at him and says, "Well, how about Walmart?" And he looks at him like deer in the headlights, and it's like, "Professor, that was 5 classes ago." And he goes, "This class is cumulative, And are there any engineers in the class? Okay, every freshman engineering has to understand this, because if you get behind in engineering, you're in bad shape. Okay, and I experienced that. I got behind in my sophomore year, and it was really, really hard to catch up. But also, we've all learned the whole cram and forget, mentality of I got to cram for the test and I'll get past it and I don't need to know it anymore. But life's not really like that, And the thing that was really I learned from the engineering program was that this class is cumulative, and you got to learn skills and take them to the next class and build, right? And I think life is like that. Side point: if you lack direction in career or relationships, whether they're business or personal, learning what you don't want can be very instructive. Hot areas, cryptocurrencies, I think is going to be an important area. Not necessarily with Bitcoin, but in other ways to transfer money. Artificial intelligence and big data is very, very important. I just heard today from a CEO that big data AI engineers are getting paid $1 million a year. So they're in high demand. It's super important. And I don't think it's working in media yet. And one of the reasons is that there's a lot of bad data or metadata that sits behind the video. But when I go to Amazon, it's like, okay, I watch a romantic comedy. I don't really want to be fed another romantic comedy, but that's what Amazon does, right? And so I think it just needs to get a whole lot smarter. And so I think we're in the first inning there. And also, don't forget about basic technology products, and doing services better. Tech, I have a love-hate relationship. Technology, it always moves and it's always interesting, but your knowledge can get usurped overnight. And sometimes I wish I was making beer. And brand, right? You're building a really strong brand. No presentation is ever complete without some John Wooden quotes. If you don't know who John Wooden is, look him up. He was the most winning UCLA basketball coach. That I thought were kind of meaningful. So never mistake activity for achievement, right? All the bad practice in the world is not going to make you better, and it requires you to think and not be robotic. Any entrepreneurial magazines will tell you if you're not making mistakes, you're not doing anything. I'm positive that a doer makes mistakes. And the last one, which I struggle with, is success is peace of mind, which is a direct result of self-satisfaction and knowing you did your best to become the best you're capable of becoming. I don't think I'm the best I'm capable of becoming yet, but I love that because it just keeps me driven. Leadership. Leadership is everything. Mr. Grant, you should be taking advantage of him. He's done a great job with this program. Social media. I was listening to somebody else talk about the effects of social media, that nobody really wants to stand out within Facebook or Snapchat or whatever. And this is something you got to fight. And where's a good place to start? Start with a club and just learn how to lead a group discussion. Learn how to motivate folks and communicate. I just recently stayed at the Encore Hotel out in Las Vegas, and I use this as an example because I was just really blown away. I go and stay in hotels and it's fine, right? And people are nice and sometimes they overtry, but in this particular situation, it's everybody in the hotel was just genuinely nice and they seemed like they cared. And so I asked somebody, it's like, what sits behind this, right? And there's people who yell and scream and use a lot of negative motivation to get people to try harder. And then there's folks who use positive motivation. In this hotel, it's all positive motivation. They set super high standards, and the result is really happy employees. And so I would encourage everybody to go out and just spend one night there and experience it, because it was a real aha moment for me, and that was just a week ago. That's all I got. Thank you so much.
Thank you, John. All right. That was outstanding information from all three of our panelists, but now we're really, it's time for your questions. I have a few, but you think of your questions for our panelists here. Never been on a panel where when you finish your section, you're handed a beer too. This is a good group. It's a good group up here. All right, so my first question actually is for you all. What are some of the common themes that you heard from each presenter up here? Three very different experiences, different industries, backgrounds that brought them to where they are today. But what are some of the themes that you all heard from our group? Who wants to be the first one? Yeah, go ahead.
What you think you're going to end up doing outside of college isn't necessarily what you're going to be doing throughout your life.
Yeah.
And therefore, you should kind of expand your skill set into things that, outside of that one vision, because things can change at any time.
Yeah, absolutely. Skills matter. It's all cumulative. You gain these skills throughout your life, and that's really what drives you in the future, not so much your undergraduate major. Yeah, back here.
I had a quick question. Everybody talks about how important it was to have a fundamental skill set from
Fundamental skill set.
but everybody cited being in an undesirable place, whether it was a job or a lifestyle. What did you know is the correct time or the right time to just kind of pull the plug and be this is what I want to pursue, my passion, or this is what I want to do?
That was my first question too, so you guys go ahead.
So I'll tell you about for me. So I had 3 successes in a row, so I felt really confident. So I had just come off of working at Chase Manhattan, where I had done a good job, and then I had done a good job at GE, and then I was at SG Cowan in New York. And so when I was there, I kept sort of looking around and seeing if I felt like I could measure up to the rest of the people around. And having had these 3 experiences, I felt pretty confident about it. And I had just earned a pretty good bonus, which I thought was great. I maybe made $100,000 or whatever it was. And so I felt like if I could just get out on my own, I could have a chance to succeed. And so I was ready to take the risk, and I had what I thought was a lot of money. It's not a lot of money when you buy a big company and you only have $100,000, you're in trouble. But, so I just felt like I had a pretty good track record, and in hindsight, it probably wasn't the wisest thing to do. I wish I had stayed at my, banking job for a little bit longer, but it gets to a point where you're working with people and you want to make the decisions. And if you want to make the decisions and you don't think there's anybody else there that can make the decisions better than you, you just got to take a chance. And I can tell you, I've looked into the abyss as a serial entrepreneur. I've come close to bankruptcy on many occasions, and it's never happened, and it's never been that bad. I've never had a problem with a bank. I've always treated them honorably. I've had trouble. We've been late on some loans occasionally, but if you keep working hard and you're honest with people, eventually it's worked out fine. So, I'm not scared of the risk as much, and I would encourage you to do the same.
Yeah, I'm still scared of the risk, for sure. I would just say you'll just sort of know when it's time. I was just going through each one of my jobs, and At Digital Equipment, again, 83 times were tough, right? And so getting a job at DEC was awesome. And so I went
I
where
realize that no one here knows what DEC or digital is.
that's usually my age cutoff. Digital Equipment employed 120, I think it was the largest employer in New Hampshire or in Massachusetts, 120,000 folks, helicopters flying between facilities. It was the number 2 computer vendor behind IBM. Their niche was the engineering community, and then they decided to chase IBM and ignore their installed base. And Sun Microsystems, which is another microcomputer vendor, came in and ate their lunch. And then they developed 3 different PCs because they couldn't decide which one to build. But that was a place, I wanted to be a lifer, and that's also something that's different between then and now. It was almost an expectation that you'd go to work for someplace and work there for 30 years. And DEC was such an awesome, they had so much great intellectual property, but a few wrong decisions later, it wasn't to be. So I moved down to Allentown, Pennsylvania for 4.5 years, and that was enough. And the year before, I had a promise to move back up north, and the guy reneged on his promise. And so I just said, thank you, I'm going to move on. And my experience at DEC helped me to get a job at McDonnell Douglas, where I sold all of the preliminary design workstation computers and software to the Central Artery Project in Boston. And that was a lot of fun. And then there, the general manager, back to my sales comment, the general manager was upset that I made more money than he did that year. And he didn't like that, and he didn't respect sales enough. So he turned the sales program into a socialist program where everybody made the same. So he lost his top 4 or 5 guys, and the company is out of business, right? And it's a bad choice. And then I went to Sybase, and at that point, I was just ready to move on from sales, and that's when I started looking at grad school.
I wish I'd done it earlier, I would say. So I sort of did it at 42, 43, and I kind of wish I'd done it at 30 because it's awesome to be your own boss. You'll never go work for someone else. So I don't know. I don't know when you know, but I think my advice is go find a job. Go, unless you know exactly what you want to do. Like, I know I want to start X, go for it. If you're ready and you think you know, I didn't know at 22 or 21 or 18. So go get a job and try to find something in an industry that you're passionate about. Remember the passion, love. If you can go get a job, I love sports, I love gardening, whatever it is, go find a job in an industry and learn what they're doing like these guys did, and then start your own, right? And I think both these guys did that. They kind of worked under people and then said, okay, now I know and understand it. The other thing I would say is, you know more than you think. I think Todd's point about you guys are as smart as the best and brightest, it's absolutely true. You don't think, I went to UNH, I didn't go to Harvard, but I work at a small company, not a big company. You start getting into these companies, you go, I'm just as smart as that guy, I'm just as talented, and if you work hard and you figure it out, then you'll start to know. And you don't have to know either, that's the fun part. If you just follow what you love, you'll kind of figure out whether you can find a niche and carve it out.
That's an important takeaway that I took from all 3 of you too, is that mentioning leveraging up, play bigger than you are. Yeah. Remember that as students too. When you're selling, I work in career and professional success, so right. When you're selling yourself, you're selling yourself. You are. It's all about sales. You're selling that your education is as good as anybody else's, and you're willing to work harder than anybody else. So remember that when you're talking about
I would say one
yourself,
more thing about sales, because John said that. Like, I never thought I'd wanted to be in sales, right? Because sales always seemed like the used car salesman, right? It's a very there's a lot of negative connotations to salespeople. At least there was when I was younger. And I was like, I'm never going into sales. And then my first job, I applied for a customer service job, seemed like an entry-level job, and the woman was like, you tried too hard, you should be in sales. I'm like, okay. And the next thing you know, I'm making 6 figures. Salespeople make money because you're the person that's selling the product. So not only are you making money in sales if you're good and you work hard, but you're learning about the business and you're learning about the customers. And I had a friend that became sort of a mentor and is one of my best friends now, and I sang at his wedding and blah, blah, blah. And one of the first things he taught me is when you get on the phone and you're trying to sell something new, ask the customer and admit, say, I'm brand new here. I don't really know that much about the industry. Can you tell me about the industry? And the people are like, yeah, I'll tell you about technology or leadership or whatever it is that you're studying. And they're happy to kind of be your mentor. And you're learning and learning and learning. You pick up a few buzzwords and all of a sudden you get it. And then you go to market and you go to another customer and you've got all that stuff. So don't be afraid to ask for help from your customers. Don't be afraid to be a beginner mind, you know, and don't be afraid of sales. Like, sales is the heartbeat and the lifeblood of any business,
But, you know, I'd almost say that I think to a great degree, people are afraid of sales. And like the general manager I work for, you know, I think, you know, you talk to marketing folks and they have their opinions about sales, but they've never done it. And so, you know, even just take 3 years, go sell. Right? Because if you're doing a good job, you're understanding the customer's problems. And if you understand the customer's problems, then you're going to be a good salesperson, right? And
So they changed the name now. It's business development, right? They don't even call it sales anymore.
that's a really important salesperson.
Can you all talk about some of those mentors that you've worked with throughout your career, and how those relationships have developed, how those mentors have changed? I really like the point about building a board of advisors, but talk a little bit about mentoring and the relationships that you've used.
I'll start because it's going to be short. I would say do as I say, not as I do. Okay, because I've started building my board of advisors, but I just found that I've gotten busy and I lack the follow-up. And so I think, you know, pick the one or the three and just set a regular appointment, whether it's once a year, twice a year, whatever you can afford and they can afford, and just stick it in your calendar and do it. But that's my failure.
So I was fortunate. I had a couple of really impactful mentors. One was this gentleman in Japan who had been a very successful executive, and he was running the business development group in this project that I was involved in. And he just left me with a couple of really important things. One was about being honest. And I remember him, I was trying to like carve this, I was trying to spin this web about how we were going to tell this customer, you know, that we couldn't do it at this time, but maybe we could do it. And he's just like, well, hold on a second. The truth is always the best. Always tell the truth. And it just stuck in my mind. He was totally right. Like, I was fabricating this, you know, white lie that I thought maybe would be more appealing to the customer, but it wouldn't have been. And it didn't make any sense that I was doing it. So anyhow, that was really great to have him. And then when I first got into commercial real estate, I met this guy, and his name was Michael Bronstein. He passed away a few years ago, and brilliant guy. He was a Harvard MBA, and he had made a very nice commercial portfolio. He owned it all himself. And he was a super paranoid guy when it came to finance, so he taught me a lot of things about, you know, how to watch out for pitfalls. But he was also extremely creative, and he had started like 18 different companies. He started a company that built funny lawnmowers, and he started a company that built indoor weather, and he just did all kinds of crazy stuff. So I was fortunate to spend about 5 years with him, and you know, he taught me a lot of stuff about the real estate business. And you know, I guess my advice to everybody in this room and anyone else who'd like to hear it is, if you're interested in having a certain business, go find somebody that's really good in that business and go to work with them for a while and learn everything you can. And then after 5 or 6 years, you'll have an opportunity. And you know, I think John said it very well. You don't know what the opportunity is going to be. It'll come up sometime, but you need to be prepared and you need to be ready to take that opportunity. And you know, if you want to be in artificial intelligence, or you want to be in AR, or you want to be in, you know, if I wanted to be in AR right now, I'd go to work for the company that does Pokemon Go. They're the best company. Or you know, figure out the right company that's the best in whatever industry you're passionate about. But you know, that's definitely been important to me, learning from somebody who knew what they were doing, and then you know, when I had an opportunity to try to show what I could do, you know, I took it.
Chris, question about mentors and the relationships that you build and how important those are to you as you build your industry or build your company.
Massive, and in fact, it reminds me of a point I meant to make. So the author, the founder of LinkedIn wrote a book, which I did not read, but somebody gave me the essence of it, and that's all you need. It's the Cliff Notes, right? Just kidding. No professors in here, right? You got to read that. So each of us have about 150 to 200 people in our sort of network. Like most people, your Facebook friends are 150 to 200, could be a lot more. I've got like 2,000, but that's a different issue. But like Army troops are in 150. It's a classic social psychology number, about 150 people, right? So then there's the power of 3 in that 150. So what I mean by that is like, I've met Todd and John. I didn't know them before. So if somebody came to me and said, do you know someone in real estate in Portsmouth? I'd say, yeah, I know Todd. And can you introduce me? And if I called Todd and said, hey, Todd, can you meet my friend Ian? Todd would probably say yes, even though we just met. Would you?
Of course.
Okay. But if I said, Todd, my friend Ian, who you don't know, so my friend John has a friend Mark. Todd's like, what? So that's the 4. You see my point? The power of 3. Like Todd's not going to meet Mark, but Todd will meet Ian because it's a one connection here. Okay? So you have 150 people in your network. The power of 3. So how big is your actual network? Raise your hand if you think you know. Or spit it out. 60,000. Because everyone has a third, has a third, has a third. If you have 200 Facebook friends, 200 people you could call and ask for an introduction, your network's 80,000. So your network is way bigger than you think. So mentors and people, it's like a mentor doesn't have to be a handsome older gentleman like these two guys. It could be a younger person. It could be a customer, right? Mentorship is about connection and knowledge and relationship, and the way we do anything and successful in business is to have a great network. So, go get it. Go get your 60,000.
Last thing on that point is be persistent, not obnoxious, but persistent. Because there are times I just, I want to help, but I just don't have the time. And if somebody pings me, if I said yes and I had to cancel.
Don't be insulted by an email.
Don't be insulted, yeah. Just ping me a month or a month and a half later and just keep after me because I really do want to help. Okay, but sometimes, job has to come first. And
you'll find other UNHers are the same way. Like UNH has a good alumni network. You just have to give them enough time. They probably have some deadlines that are due whenever. Just give them enough time.
My first job in Boston, I got hired because there were other people that worked there that went to UNH that have been successful. So the hiring manager was like, I like you because I like UNH guys. And it's unbelievable how much UNH in Boston is huge. And UNH will absolutely help your career and leverage that network 100%. The other thing I would say, if you're trying to get in touch with someone, email them, call them. Nobody calls anymore. Don't leave me a message because I'll never listen to the message. But if you call, I'm like, shoot, Jim called. I got to call him back. If I get an email, I can blow it off, right? But if you call someone, you're more likely. And if you call them again, hey, I'm just checking in. The guy who founded Woodchuck Cider, you guys have Woodchuck? Young guy, or not a young guy, about my age. But he started a company, or he bought the company, and he sold it. He sold it about 4 years ago for $300 million on $60 million in sales. He got 5x revenue. And most companies, it's EBITDA that you get paid on. He got 5x revenue because at the time he was the only national cider brand, and it was right before Sam Adams launched Angry Orchard. He had a contract with Buffalo Wild Wings. He was in all 50 states. And I'm like, I'm going to meet this guy. He didn't know me from Adam, but I'm like, I just called him. I'm like, hey, hey Brett, what's up? Chris Webb, Newburyport Brewing Company. I met one of your guys. I sort of knew, but I didn't ask for an introduction. And he didn't call me. He didn't call me back. A couple weeks later, hey, Brett, Chris Webb. I called him like 3 times. Finally, the 4th time, I go, dude, I am not going to stop calling you. You need to call me back. And I was sort of being tongue-in-cheek, playful, obnoxious. He called me right back. And he's like, oh, my God, I'm so sorry I didn't call you. I've been meaning to call you. It's not that he didn't want to talk to me. He's just a busy guy, right? He's a multimillionaire now. So I said, all right, would you be willing to sit down and talk to me? Because I'm just starting my business. He's like, sure. So I said, I'll come to you. So he lived in Rhode Island. We met in Providence, and I took him out to lunch. I paid, and he told me 2 hours worth of stories that were out of this world. And he's a friend still. He invested in a brewery in Long Island. He calls me now for beer advice, and I consider him a friend. So anyway.
So one last thing, as long as we're on this, I don't know about you guys, but for me, do not Facebook, not Facebook, I'm not that public, but don't LinkedIn me, right? Because that's for people I know. And if I don't know you, I don't want to be, that's special. Don't text me, okay? So it's call or email. You guys?
So if I haven't met somebody, usually I don't respond to their friend request. Or their, if I've met them and I know them, obviously I would, if they're a friend, I would friend them. Yeah, but if I haven't met somebody and they ask me, to link up on LinkedIn, it just seems insincere.
Yeah, people do that for prospecting. So instead of just picking up the phone,
and
which again,
I don't mind email.
Email's fine.
Yeah,
but it's like sales, right? It's a little scary to call somebody on the phone, right? So just step up and do it, and it'll make the difference.
So on that line, I'm going to throw the question to you, but this is a perfect setup for me, so I have to do this. But your UNH network, as these guys mentioned, UNH is a powerful network, and Wildcats take care of Wildcats. We've heard that, throughout that. Wildcats or UNH is a common theme, and you have an instant talking point. We're going to be launching Career and Professional Success, and UNH is going to be launching a Wildcat Connections platform in the fall that is a direct result of UNH alumni and students wanting to work together to create that team of advisors. It's like LinkedIn, but there's no sales involved. So you'll be able to connect with alumni and really make a meaningful connection. And the alumni, you guys are in charge of how much that connection is, whether we meet up for coffee once a month or it's a phone call that we do once and then I'm able to provide that to the student and then move on. So anyways, that's going to launch in the fall, Wildcat Connections. Keep an eye out for it. It's going to be a great asset to our opening up that full UNH alumni network. Yeah, Ian.
Quick question for all of you. It's a little bit of the heels of that question before about when you know. Do you trust your gut or your analytical head, or your gut instinct?
My answer to that question would be it's a combination. It's really more about the opportunity that's in front of you and can you make it work. I didn't plan to quit my job and go move to Columbus. I found the opportunity in Columbus and got the company in contract, tried to build my nest egg as much as I could, and then I moved. So I would say seek the opportunity first and then make your jump.
Yeah, I would say it's a combination of both. I think your gut is probably the most powerful thing. Making the leap out of deck and McDonnell Douglas. I think I kind of knew what I wanted to do, but I gave it a year, right? I told the guys, listen, I don't like what you've done. I'm going to give you a year, and then if it doesn't change, I'm going to take off. But it was it Ronald Reagan that said, trust but verify, right? So trust your gut, but do your homework and verify.
For you two, what was the most rewarding and most overrated part of graduate school, in your opinion?
Part of graduate school?
Yeah.
So I'll take it. So it took me 12 years to go back to grad school. So I went back late, probably arguably too late. But the thing that was great was that I knew why I wanted to go back. So when I was in engineering school, it's like I kind of didn't love it, right? And that was my 2.5-year experience, right? And I just gutted out the rest. But when I went back to graduate school, I was in business, so I knew what I needed to learn out of marketing and finance and the like. And so I loved graduate school. I was like a kid in a candy shop, and it was very different than my undergrad experience. So that would be the one.
So for me, so I went back fairly soon. I was back in '94, and it was great. Because when I graduated from UNH, I took all the classes and I got my, I had a business degree and I had a political science degree and I had sort of flirted with the idea of being an attorney, but I didn't really know finance and accounting that well. I got pretty good grades, but just to give you an example, when I went into my first finance class, at Cornell as a grad student, they went through everything we learned in the whole semester in the first day. So it was all done. I was like, wait a minute, present value, future value, that's it. That was all done on day one. It's like, move on. So it was a great time to meet other people. Like, I made a lot of really great friends. I had been recently, I was newlywed, so it was, a good time in my life. We were just, we had no money. We were living in Ithaca, New York, but we were passionate about the subjects. Just like John said, I was super excited to learn all this stuff, and I studied really hard. And the future's extremely bright. When you're in grad school and you're, learning something that you care about. So, that part was fantastic. Overrated. I can't really think of anything. The only thing that was a bit of a bummer is you did have to check out of the entire workforce for about 2 years. So that's a little bit of a bummer. And while I'm there studying finance and accounting, this is 94, 5, 6. Netscape comes out, and the internet blows up, and here I am, working on finance and accounting, and this whole industry just blows up, and I just missed it. It just went right over my head.
I think you never regret any education you get, and you don't necessarily need it. Once you get into business and you figure it out, you don't need that MBA because you've got it. So you go get an MBA and you're like, yeah, I already know that stuff. Having said that, if you're in there and it's going okay and you get that MBA, that can qualify you for the job at Boston Consulting Group or the bigger, better job. It's definitely a check the box, right? But my experience is I've seen people make millions and do great work without an MBA or a graduate degree. So you don't necessarily need it to be successful, and you do get out of the market. But some people want to see it for the checking the box at that partner level at a BCG or a Bain or wherever you end up. That's just in the consulting world. The other thing I would say is when I got my master's in counseling with my dad, so I worked for 6 years in Boston at this consulting firm, and my dad said, come and take a master's with me at UNH. It's counseling, it'll do it in a year and a half, it'll be great. I'm like, you know what, Dad, I'm gonna do it. I sort of was burnt out from working. I took a year and a half off. I stayed in Boston, but I would come and stay with my folks. It was great. Almost all my fellow students were 23, 24. They had just graduated from UNH and they were going to get that master's in ed. And so here I am, I'm 30 at the time, which felt really old. When you're 48, 30 looks really young, but I definitely brought more to the party than the kids that were 23 just going right into graduate school. So I would not recommend going right into graduate school. I would recommend going and getting a job or a couple of jobs. You're going to bring way more to the party, and therefore you're going to take more from the party because you're going to have a better experience. You're going to bring more. You're going to learn more. So yeah, I wouldn't rush into graduate school because you go to undergrad. It's kind of like, I don't know how many of you know exactly what you want to do when you got here and you knew your major. Yeah, one of you.
And that's awesome.
And that's awesome. But I didn't know what I wanted to do. And you kind of come to college and you're growing up in college. You're 18 to 22. Everybody goes to college. You kind of have to get that bachelor's degree. A master's degree you only need if you need it. Only go get it if it's if I get this, I can be a lawyer, or if I get that MBA, I get the job at Boston Consulting Group, or if I get that master's or that PhD, I can be a professor. But if you don't have that clear track, I would say go work, make money, and then when you're clear and you know exactly what you want to do, then you get the master's if you need it.
Great. Other questions in the room? Yeah.
I have a question just from what I've heard from a lot of entrepreneurs, you're going to hear no a million times until you hear that one yes. I just want to know, from your perspective, because all of you started your companies later on after being in the workforce for a while.
What are you trying to say?
No, I'm saying I don't know if it's any different. After being in the workforce, feeling you have more underneath you to build upon. If those no's are not as frequent, just because you have more capital to work with, or just having been in the field and having more connections and stuff I just don't know.
Yeah. I'll answer that. I think when I started the company at 42, I thought, well, shit, I'm 42, so I'm have enough energy to do it. I'm still young enough, but I'm credible enough to raise $1 million. I'm not sure I could have got $1 million at 30 or 32. Who is this? At 42, it's okay, you've been in the work for 20 years. I can say I've done this, I've done that. You look older, you have that kind of confidence, and I think that is important. It's not necessary, but it's absolutely helpful in some ways, right? To sort of have that, cachet. As far as like the no for a yes, I mean, that's just like a mentality. That's like a stop at nothing. I talked about that earlier. Like, I'm going to be a musician. I'm going to be an athlete. I'm going to work at BCG and be a partner and make $1 million a year. I'm going to start my own business. Like, nothing's going to stop me from doing it. And then you just keep pushing through. And so, yeah, you're going to get no's, and you're going to get more no's as a young person, because like, yeah, what do you know? You're just a young kid. One of the things that we used to coach young MBA students or young consultants on in my old company was most 23 to 27-year-olds always want to talk about how smart they are. So they're always talking and talking and talking, because they want to prove to the 40-somethings and the 50-somethings how smart they are, whereas the 40 and 50-year-olds in the room are just quiet, because they're confident and they already know and they don't have to prove to themselves. So having self-awareness about how you show up in the room, not over-talking, pausing, just sort of like, the smartest people in the room are the ones that are asking questions, not talking, right? Because I already know what I know, but for me to get smarter, I have to figure out what Ian knows and what John knows and what Todd and Tyler know. So, not really answering your question, but.
No, I think you said that extremely well. The other skill that I constantly am trying to improve on is ask better questions. Learn how to ask good questions. Read a book on it, because it's a skill. It's a thing I accuse people from Yale of being really good at, and I don't know why, but all people from Yale that I've met ask really good questions, and they keep on asking the first degree, the second degree, and they just dig and dig and dig to the point where they're just asking questions. They're actually not saying anything, right? And if you ask good, intelligent questions and you show that you're listening, right? It's called active listening, right? That is the best skill that you can acquire, and at that point you'll be years ahead of the game.
So my thought for you is really, when if you have done the things that I think some of us have done, you're in the business already. So it's easy for you to know you have a successful option. You have a successful opportunity because you've been in the business for a while. John had worked already, for Templeton, and he kind of knew what the business was like. I had worked in commercial real estate, and I had learned a lot from this mentor I just mentioned for about 5 years. So when the opportunity came to buy, this apartment complex, I knew I was going to be able to raise the money, and I knew it was going to be great because I had been doing it for 5 years. So that's another reason to really pick the industry that you want to be in and learn as much. Then you'll know more people in the industry. You'll learn about how the whole process works. And when you have the opportunity, you won't get no's. You'll get yeses because it'll be a good idea.
But just be persistent, because J.K. Rowling, and there's an endless list of really, really wealthy, successful people that had a lot of no's. And it's hard to know when to fish or cut bait, but.
The answer to how is yes.
So we've got about 5 minutes left, so we'll take a couple more questions, but about 5 minutes left. Yeah.
Is there a book or an author that was most influential to you as you went through this process?
So this is really cheesy, but when I was 22, and I was in Japan, living in Japan, and my girlfriend had just moved back to Chicago, and the guy who was living next door to me gave me a 7 Habits of Highly Effective People book by Stephen Covey, and I was sitting around by myself alone working crazy for this company, and I had nothing else to do except really read that book. But that book is a great resource. I don't know if anybody read that book, 7 Habits? Yeah. So 7 Habits, for me, it really kind of focused me and helped me set some goals that I wanted to achieve, for the rest of my life. And I had that 6-month period where I had very few distractions, and my Japanese wasn't that good, so I wasn't speaking to that many people. I really got a chance to do all the exercises in that book, and I still have lists of 25 things I want to do in my wallet, and that actually helped me clarify like the kind of person I wanted to be and the life I wanted to live.
I would say two, one of which is a book called Atlas Shrugged. And it's a must-read in my view, whether you agree with her or not, right? It's provocative. There's a 100-page speech which you can skip because I think it's repetitive, but other than that, I thought it was a very well laid out book. And then the other thing from an investment standpoint was Warren Buffett's 10Ks, Berkshire Hathaway's 10Ks, because they're just a great read, and you can go back 20, 30 years and just read them.
Yeah, I mentioned it earlier, the whole passion skills. Jim Collins, Good to Great, Built to Last, easy to read, great business guy, just brilliant.
I'll throw one in too. The Leadership Challenge by Kuz and Posner, great book. We'll talk specifically about how to lead people and how to motivate people. So, there was a question in the back. You had your hand up.
Did your psychology major play a large role in like building a successful business?
Yes, it definitely did. In fact, my first company, the founder had a PhD from Harvard and a master's in counseling psychology from Salem State, and he told me the master's was better for him as a consultant, right? Because psychology is a study of human behavior and people. And so, I went into sales. I think it helped me in my consulting world. I think it helped me to this day as I go in front of distributors and I meet customers, like having that psych background, that liberal arts, that, understanding of people, as I understand myself, right, I'm more comfortable in my own skin, and therefore I think I can be more relatable, connecting to other people, right? So absolutely. Are you studying psych? Yeah, no, psychology is a wonderful, wonderful field. I got a master's in psych. My mom was a psychotherapist. My dad has a PhD from Stanford in psychology. My brother just won Counselor of the Year for Goffstown High School for the state of New Hampshire. We've got counseling in our blood. And, so my head shrunk as a kid a little bit, but no, it's great. Psychology is a great field, a great study. The other thing I would say is that I always thought psychology meant like counseling or clinical or social work, like it meant kind of people. And that way, when I moved to Boston, my career ended up in management consulting, ended up being in this whole field of I/O psychology, which is industrial/organizational psychology. There's a whole field in business called about organizational psychology, where you can go and work on organizational development and do assessments and do performance management. Like there are jobs in business that focus on psychology, which is great. Because if you're passionate about it and there's a need, so I definitely would say yes to that.
Any good psych book recommendations?
Help me out. I haven't read a psych book in a while.
Walden 2.
Walden 2, yeah, there you go. Lord of the Flies? Not off the top of my head for business per se. I mean, Noel Tishy, Warren Bennis, leadership guys. Those are two guys. Warren Bennis and Noel Tishy, the leadership engine, are I would say two guys that kind of take the organizational psychology. But if you just Google organizational psychology and look around and find some stuff, I think a lot of the traditional psychology books, none of my psych classes at UNH talked about organizational industrial psychology, or if they did, it didn't really sink in, because I was sort of like a psychologist is like my dad who teaches or my mom who has clients. Like that's kind of how I thought psychology was. Turns out it's a bigger field. Yeah.
So remember, skills over major. Skills over major, I think, is what that resonates. But thank you so much to our panelists. A really outstanding information tonight.